This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
United Nations report reveals how school fees use up large chunks of African families' income. Suspected Islamist kills 16 people in eastern DR Congo. And China and Nicaragua finally normalized ties after more than 30 years, kicking off relations with a communique signing in Tianjin. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. We're coming live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the very latest in business is Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the next 30 minutes. South Africa's manufacturing production records its sharpest contraction in more than a year as factory output drops in October. And top Chinese officials lay out priorities for 2022 at a key economic conference in Beijing. We'll add the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thank you so much, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. Well, a new report released by the UN's education body UNESCO shows that families in sub-Saharan Africa are spending a huge chunk of their household income on educating their children. According to the report, many of these families are being priced out of quality education. In Ghana, for example, an average of 13% of a family's expenditure goes to schooling. In sub-Saharan Africa, nearly 40% of money spent on education comes from families rather than other sources like government. The report warns that 8% of families in low and middle-income countries have to borrow to pay for school fees. The rate is even higher in countries like Uganda and Kenya, where a third of all families have to take loans to fund school fees. The Global Education Monitoring Report released Friday says that there is a growing risk of inequality and exclusion in provision of education. Well, for more on that story, we're joined by Funmi Ilori, education expert and director at iRise Model School in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us, Funmi. What are your thoughts on this UN report about school fees using up a large chunk of African families' incomes?
Yes, I totally agree to the report that says the most part of the sub-Saharan family income is spent on education. Yes, it's even above the 40% because you find different people, the minimum wage being 30,000 naira, and that is just about $200. And there is no way that the school fees are way above that. So if you find a low-income school, they pay between $150 to $200 per term. And this is exactly what the minimum wage would be. So there is no way the families can even afford that, except they have additional income for them to be able to pay their children's fees. And we have families with 2 children, 3 children, even 4 children. And so this is causing a lot of inequality, and children cannot stay in school.
And so what is happening is that in some regions on the continent, you're finding that if children cannot pay those school fees, even in the public school system, they're being kicked out of school and they cannot go to school. But what does that mean when it comes to the eradication of poverty on the continent? Because we keep on hearing organizations like the UN, for instance, that talks about how important it is for education to be a priority and quality education to be able to be one of the factors that eradicates poverty. What does that do for the fight against poverty here on the continent?
There is no way the government will not deal with access to quality education, and they want poverty to be eradicated. It cannot work. Quality education must be a priority. We have the government schools that are non-paying, and then we have overwhelming enrollment. We have overcrowded classrooms. The government needs to begin to look inwards and give more support to the private institutions and also give more access. You find out that many of the children can go to school, yet they cannot even afford proper meals. They do not have access to quality health care. They cannot afford all the accessories that they need for quality education. If there is no intervention to quality education, we cannot be talking about eradication of poverty.
Speak to us about some of what you've seen. I mean, maybe even from IRA's model school, just some of what you've seen of how civil society can maybe get involved to fill in some of the gaps that might not be filled at the moment. Is there a way that civil society can get involved to improve this picture that we're seeing?
Yes, so we have a lot of interventions happening. Both, my school is a middle and low income school. The fees in Naira is 20,000 Naira for the children. Yet we have families that cannot afford it because it seems to even be the most expensive school within the community. We have graduates as teachers, we have support staff, we have a lot of things that we need to take care of. What I can say concerning that is, because we run an additional project called the iRead Mobile Library, and that gives us a lot of free access for children to come into the library. And so we make that support to our community to ensure that more children can be enrolled in the school. However, the teachers need to be paid. The workers need to be paid. We need a lot of support in terms of government. The government needs to support private institutions. The government cannot do it alone. The government cannot achieve it alone. So there has to be a sort of cushion for the private institutions. You have private institutions, and yet the private institutions have to pay government taxes. Some of them going through the approval of the schools. It becomes so hectic that these schools cannot even stand on their own. And so as a private organization providing quality education, we cannot do everything by ourselves. The parents are struggling.
Funmi,
They're struggling so much to keep their children
thank you so
in
much.
school.
Thank you so much for your input on the program. Funmi Ilori, education expert and director at IRA's model school in Lagos. We're returning to South Africa now, where health officials there have announced plans to roll out a vaccine booster shots. This comes as daily infections are approaching an all-time high. As of Thursday, the country recorded over 22,000 new COVID-19 cases. So far, 38% of South African adults have been fully vaccinated. Speaking via a virtual conference, South Africa's Health Minister Joe Phaahla also touched on the impact of the Omicron variant. Phaahla said early signs showed that vaccines were so far providing protection from severe cases of COVID-19.
This is still early days, but there are very promising signs that largely patients, even those who are in hospital, are mild. Many of them are incidental. They came into hospital for other reasons, other illnesses. And because when you have to be admitted, you have to be tested first. And many of those who had come for other reasons have tested positive, notwithstanding that they are not ill from the COVID-19 variant itself. In terms of the symptoms, we have from reports from various doctors, we don't have any information that suggests that this variant causes different symptoms from other variants. Anecdotal information from doctors have reported that patients present with scratchy throat, cough, fever, diarrhea, and vomiting. In children, many have no respiratory symptoms. So children often test positive without any respiratory symptoms. Preliminary evidence suggests that there may be an increased risk of reinfection with this variant. People who have had previous COVID could become infected more easily with this variant as compared to the previous variants of concern. So as things stand, the vaccines are showing to be really still very strong in protecting against severe disease. As it has been with the previous variants, it shows what the figures from the numbers from hospitals does show that indeed those who are vaccinated are much better protected even against this. and the proportion of admissions in children less than 5 years in total admissions has decreased to 14%. It was 21, then 14% in week 46, and currently it's even lower at 8%. So this seemed to have been the phenomenon early.
The discovery and spread of the Omicron COVID variant is a stark reminder to the African continent that it needs to hurry and develop its own vaccine manufacturing capacity to ensure viable vaccine security for its population. It's led to the creation of a consortium to create the first technology transfer hub for COVID-19 vaccines on the continent. Angela Coppola has the story.
The partnership includes the South African Medical Research Council, Afrigen, BioVac, the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Medicines Patent Pool.
It is time that Africa, which has we've got the people, we've got the brains, we've got the universities. It really is time that we create the environment, the infrastructure for the scientists in Africa to be able to address the African problems first and come up with the solutions, and then going beyond the African problems to the global problems.
The hub is a prime example of political will from the government and a range of different industries and sectors coming together for the common good.
This is our scientists, this is our laboratories, our research entities, whether you talk about the Medical Research Council, the universities, and the CSIR. So both of them are already mobilized to support this, including our companies.
A South African company has been selected as the first technology and training transfer hub to develop the mRNA vaccine platform.
So we are the technology developer, the clinical trial material producer, and a full turnkey package to be transferred to commercial entities for commercial production. We will also train vertically integrated people from companies in low and middle income countries who will be receiving our technology.
The budget to get the hub up and running is 93 million euros, and more than half of it has already been raised. It's enough to keep the project on track for the next 18 months.
What's been extremely encouraging to see is the number of donor countries who are right behind this. We have a whole list of them who have expressed interest. Some of them have already committed funds. Some of them we're in the middle of negotiating agreements with, and some of them are just waiting to see where the gaps are to come forward to fill them.
The process of developing and producing a vaccine from scratch is complicated. 900 standard operating procedure documents have to be developed, written and tested before there is regulatory approval.
It is the systems around the science that will ensure the world that the vaccine that we have produced in Africa meets the quality standards, safety, efficacy, and affordability of the best vaccines in the world.
The good news is that the hub is almost operational, and it's expected that the first vaccine sample will be ready at the end of January. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, health officials across the African continent are struggling to overcome vaccine hesitancy. Richer countries have donated more vaccines in recent months, which means more doses are available to the public across the continent. However, medics on the continent are now racing against time to inoculate people before the vaccines expire. Vaccine hesitancy has led to rising vaccine stockpiles. CGTN's Joy Kiruki-Juma reports.
Pender Health is a low-cost private healthcare facility found in a poor neighborhood of Kenya's capital, Nairobi. It has found one way to speed up the uptake of vaccines by bringing the shots closer home. For many Kenyans, traveling to one of the big hospital facilities prioritized as vaccine centers has meant lost earnings.
Well, because it's closer to my place, I have a son, so it's more accessible. I just walk a minute and I'm here.
With just 7% of people fully vaccinated across Africa, experts are now urging African governments to follow the example of Pender. Pender Health was founded in 2012. It offers shots in only 7 of its 21 clinics in Nairobi due to the expenses involved in rolling out the program.
It's really unfair that when there's a new development in healthcare and medicine and medical science somewhere in the world, it takes too long for it to get to the people who live in our communities. And so part of what Penda is trying to do is shorten the time to get those new medical innovations to our patients. So when the COVID vaccine came around, we were really excited because this is one of the key ways that we can put an end to the pandemic.
But people like Jafet Mutua still need to be convinced that the vaccine is good for them.
People should be educated first about the vaccine. If there are any complications, at least they should be told before they take the vaccines, because we have heard so many stories, and those stories may be, okay, me, I'm not buying them, but maybe there are some people who are being scared of the story. So the government and all the health entities should come out clearly and explain to people.
The duty to disseminate information plagues many countries in Africa. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Well, turning to the DRC, locals are reporting a militant attack in the country's east. According to Deputy Mayor of Mangina, the assault took place on Wednesday night. Freddy Mbaimbai said the militants attacked the rural commune located in North Kivu province. Mbayayi said an unknown number of people were also kidnapped. Residents allege that the ADF is responsible for carrying out the attack. DRC and Uganda are currently carrying out joint military operation against the militant group. Well, CGTN's Chris Ochambringa is in Kinshasa, the DRC's capital, and he joins us now. Hi there, Chris. What more can you tell us about the alleged killings by the ADF militants in eastern DR Congo?
Well, the local authorities in North Kivu province are saying that these suspected ADF rebels stormed two villages, Mangina and Masirika. These villages were the area where the DRC's worst Ebola outbreak happened in 2018. They say the rebels stormed the area and started, attacking civilians indiscriminately. They cut them, hacked them to death with machetes, and left to other areas. Many people had to run to neighboring areas. It was a very, very sad situation. And like you mentioned earlier, there's a number of people who have been abducted. We don't know how many. The authorities in that area, the military spokesperson in North Kivu province says they counted six bodies. But some civil society members are saying that it was 16 people. The government hasn't issued a statement about this killing, but it's a very sad state of affairs in that area because there's been an increase in these attacks against civilians, people who have suffered from disease for a very long time, who are trying to get back, to their usual lives, always living in fear of being attacked by rebels who are always, roaming that area. We have been informed that there was a very small number of Congolese military troops in that area, and that is why the suspected ADF rebels came in and just killed people and took off without, much of a resistance. Hannah?
Chris, what are you hearing as a reason behind this escalation of violence in that region? And also, we do know that Uganda and the DRC have been carrying out joint operations against the ADF rebel group in that region. If you can tell us more about the status of that operation currently.
Yes, the operation between the Ugandan troops and the Congolese army is ongoing, but there has been a kind of a lull in activities because the UPDF, the Ugandan troops, haven't been able to pursue the rebels. That area has a very rocky terrain. It's not possible to go in with their armored vehicles, so they have brought in some heavy-duty vehicles to try and clear the path, and then they will start pursuing. The military commander of the Ugandan troops said it will take them a few days to finish doing that, and then they will go in and pursue the rebels wherever they are. The Ugandan army says it will not leave the DRC until the enemy is defeated, but there are people who are very concerned about, the presence of the Ugandan troops in the DRC. Some Congolese, especially in the capital Kinshasa, are very opposed to it because they still have very fresh memories of the Ugandan troops, the activities that they carried out in eastern DRC between 1998 and 2003, when, there was a lot of looting. They plundered a lot of the wealth the natural resources of the DRC. So there are some people who are very opposed to it. And there are also neighboring countries like Rwanda that has been very, very opposed to Ugandan troops coming here, because Rwanda has been accusing Uganda of supporting rebels who are seeking to topple the administration of President Paul Kagame. Uganda also accuses Rwanda, of supporting ADF. So there is a real threat that this might suck in other countries in the Great Lakes region and have a mess like it happened in between 1996 and 2003 in the DRC. There are some diplomats who are really trying to diffuse the tensions, but we're waiting to see how this will play out. Hannah?
Such a complex issue, Chris. Thank you so much for bringing us the latest on that story. Chris Chamaringa speaking to us from the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. Well, let's not take a short break and return. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live. China and Nicaragua finally normalized ties after more than 30 years, kicking off relations with a communique signing in Tianjin. And Uganda launches a nutrition program to improve the diet of the vulnerable.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
clear
line.
View of this front line position.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, China and Nicaragua have resumed diplomatic relations. It comes after the Latin American country announced that it would recognize the One China principle, which rules that Taiwan is part of China. Louis Siri has more.
Representatives from the Chinese and Nicaraguan government signed a communique to restore ties in the Chinese city of Tianjin. The communique says the decision is in keeping with the interests and desires of the two peoples. The countries are to develop friendly relations based on several principles, including mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Nicaragua has become the 181st country to establish normal diplomatic relations with China. Nicaragua has made important decisions to resume and develop normal relations with China. And like most other countries, it is on the right side of history.
China severed the diplomatic ties with Nicaragua in 1990s as the Central American country recognized Taiwan. But on Thursday, the Nicaraguan government have announced that it's ending diplomatic ties with the region. Manigua said it recognized that there's only one single China. The resumption of ties comes in the midst of increasing tensions between the Chinese mainland and the region of Taiwan. Some experts say Nicaragua has reconsidered its international relations and its change in stance represents general development trends. Well, it could also set an example to other Latin American countries that don't have diplomatic relations with China.
The relationship between China and Latin America is a two-way complementary relationship. In the past, some cooperation projects between the two have been suspended because of a break of diplomatic ties. But they will resume as diplomatic ties resume. Although it is purely Nicaragua's initiative to recognize One China principle, I think new cooperation projects will certainly be proposed.
With a population of 6 million, Nicaragua borders Costa Rica and Honduras. The country's mixed economic system includes a variety of private industries, combined with centralized economic planning and government regulation. Lucire, CGTN, Beijing.
China joined the World Trade Organization in late 2001. Its exports at the time were a fraction of the $900 billion worth of products it sends around the world today. A country once known for cheap, mass-produced goods is increasingly exporting some of the world's most technologically advanced equipment. Owen Ferkla reports.
It may be something of a retro antique these days, but this Nokia phone was considered a game changer when it was launched in 2001. Less than a month before China joined the World Trade Organization on December the 11th. Designed and built in Finland, it was Nokia's first phone to contain a camera, a symbol of the company's worldwide dominance at the time.
And back in 2001, China was the world's factory, producing massive volumes of mostly low-end goods such as clothes, but not the cell phones that were revolutionizing our lives. That began to change as China pivoted to become the world's preeminent manufacturer of not just smartphones for foreign clients such as Apple, but increasingly high-end gadgets for its own brands.
China's WTO accession completed its entry into the global economy, and today its technology is everywhere, from the world's fastest train to nuclear power plants, as well as high-end smartphones.
China's export growth has not been driven by doing more of the same, of taking the same textiles that was done 20 years ago and producing more of them. China's export growth has been driven by doing producing new exports.
Tim Chesterton's Harvard University team ranks countries on the complexity of their exports, from peanuts to photography equipment. And over the last 20 years, China has narrowed the gap on rivals such as Japan and the US. This transformation in the kind of business China does with the world is also changing a country that lifted some 800 million people out of poverty. Consumer goods imports are now more than 10 times what they were back in 2001 to meet the demands of a population with money to spend.
The strong base that China had in its manufacturing base moving into the WTO accession in 2001 allowed it to rapidly move into higher value segments over time.
If China's progress is considered a blueprint for emerging economies, it's also a warning for once dominant companies like Nokia, whose failure to innovate allowed Apple to eat its market. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
New Zealand says that it will outlaw smoking for the next generation, one of the toughest approaches in the world to curbing smoking deaths. Owen Poland reports from Auckland.
Well, New Zealand has been at the forefront of anti-smoking legislation for more than 3 decades, and this latest initiative is part of an ambitious move to make the country smoke-free by 2025. At the moment, it's illegal to sell tobacco products to anyone under the age of 18 years. However, the proposed law goes much further than that because it effectively bans the sale of cigarettes to future generations. From 2025, it'll be illegal to sell tobacco to anyone who was born after the year 2010. And that means anyone who is 14 years old or younger from 2025 will never legally be allowed to buy tobacco. Well, the chairman of the Medical Association says the new smoking policy will be a defining moment for respiratory health in New Zealand. However, there's been a negative response from the retailers who sell cigarettes. At the moment, there's around 8,000 businesses who are licensed to sell tobacco, but that number will be slashed to just 500 across the country from 2025, and some business owners are calling for compensation for lost revenue. One of the biggest concerns is the likelihood of a black market being created, and so the government is looking to introduce tough new penalties to stop illegal products being imported and sold. Despite these potential challenges, the New Zealand government says that the new smoking laws will be an historic moment for the health of New Zealanders. And it's been estimated that the new smoke-free laws could save the country more than $5 billion a year in future health costs.
Well, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid made his first official visit to the Egyptian capital, Cairo. He held talks with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri about maintaining calm in Gaza and developing the Palestinian Strip economically. Lapid has also returned some stolen ancient Egyptian artifacts. Here's CGTN's Adel Mrouhi with more.
In a move to boost bilateral ties between the two nations, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid made his first trip to Cairo on Thursday. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi led the talks with the top Israeli diplomat. Sisi stressed the importance of maintaining calm with the Palestinian side and reviving peace talks based on a two-state solution.
Egypt is the only country that has the ability to directly communicate with all stakeholders of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Recently, Egypt managed to reach a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. Therefore, the foreign minister's visit to Cairo comes as Israel understands the positive role Egypt can lead to maintain calm.
In talks with his Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry, Lapid discussed means to forge a stronger ceasefire with Gaza. The Israeli foreign minister also presented an economic development plan for the Palestinian Strip. Israel wants Egypt's help to broker a prisoners' exchange with Hamas in return to releasing 2 Israeli soldiers.
Hamas has to follow the Egyptian agenda, as it is one of the Palestinian organizations that is directly engaged with Egypt. The Rafah passage and the underground tunnels are issues of national security, breaches of which have seen Egyptian security forces die. The passage is also the only way out of Gaza, which Israel doesn't control.
After the talks with Shoukry, Lapid returned 95 Egyptian archaeological artifacts. The items were smuggled into Israel and retrieved by the authorities there in 2013. Returning stolen ancient Egyptian artifacts is a gesture Cairo greatly values. Ties between Egypt and Israel have been witnessing significant development. In May, Gabi Ashkenazi from Netanyahu's government was the first Israeli foreign minister to visit Cairo in 13 years. In September, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett made his first official visit to Egypt. And Lapid's first visit to Cairo is the 3rd visit by an Israeli diplomat in less than a year. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Uganda has launched a nutrition program to help improve the diets for children, pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers in refugee settlements in the West Nile and northwest of the country. The project, named NutriCash, is funded by Sweden and will be implemented by the World Food Programme and UNICEF. Isabel Nakira reports.
Refugees that will benefit from the cash transfers are those hit hardest. The WFP says each refugee family will receive a cash transfer of $14 every month to help meet their nutrition needs and improve their lifestyles and health. The NutriCash program will be implemented across 8 districts in West Nile and northwest of the country that have been impacted with rapid population growth, including the COVID-19 pandemic. The food agency says their response plans have been impacted by limited resources.
These countries that are funding international humanitarian assistance in Uganda and elsewhere are also challenged at home. Their economies have been hit by COVID-19, and then they've also been needing to allocate a lot of money to deal with problems at home, supporting health systems that are under severe challenges, and doing economic support and stimulus packages back in their own countries.
The UN Children's Fund UNICEF warns 3 out of every 10 children in the West Nile region are stunted due to poor diets. And this could worsen malnutrition levels in children and damage their ability to learn if more assistance is not received. In October, the WFP adjusted food assistance by increasing rations for the most vulnerable refugees. Despite donations beginning to pour in, the WFP says it still has a shortfall of $57 million to meet the assistance that refugees need over the next 6 months. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more news on Africa Live, including the latest in sport. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. South Africa's manufacturing production contracts at its sharpest rate in more than a year as factory output drops in October. And top Chinese officials are laying out priorities for 2022 with a key economic conference in Beijing.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in South Africa. The country's manufacturing sector saw its sharpest contraction in over a year in October. Now, that was the result of a mix of factors, including labour action and load shedding as well. Factory output was down by nearly 9% year on year, according to data from Stats SA, hitting the worst level since August 2020. That was even worse than the 4.8% decline in July, when civil unrest tore through the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng. Now, at the same time, South Africa was also in a level 4 lockdown as the country battled a surge in COVID-19 infections. South Africa's economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic this year has been pretty uneven, to put it mildly. Those riots smack in the middle of the year did trigger a 1.5% contraction in GDP in the third quarter, with trade, manufacturing and agriculture being the hardest hit. Zimbabwe's mining sector is upbeat about the odds of hitting a growth target of 8% in 2022, provided there's adequate government support to resolve issues that have hindered its success in the past. Now, the sector's economic output is expected to grow by around 3.5% this year before accelerating to 8% in 2022. The country aims to raise mining sector GDP to around $12 billion in 2023. In the budget unveiled in late November, Zimbabwe's government allocated about $3 billion in spending to the mining industry. The managing director of the International Monetary Fund has described the Democratic Republic of Congo as a rare bright spot in Africa's economic performance. Kristalina Georgieva says that this is due to a combination of high commodity prices and government reforms as well. The country is the top African producer of copper, and it's the world's leading cobalt miner too. The reforms enacted by President Felix Tshisekedi's administration include greater independence for the central bank and better revenue collection.
We are pursuing the mobilization of $100 billion from our members with strong reserve positions to be directed to members in need. We are discussing ways in which DRC can benefit from this $100 billion.
With more on Kristalina Georgieva's visit to the DRC, here's CGTN's Chris Ochamringa.
The visit of the International Monetary Fund chief focused on discussions about the support that the global lender can offer the DRC to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. The onset of the pandemic led to many job losses, which had adverse social and economic impacts. In April last year, the IMF allocated $363 million to the DRC to help the country deal with the effects of the pandemic. IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva met with the DRC president Felix Tshisekedi and praised his government for implementing reforms that improved the country's economic performance. An increase in global prices of the DRC's key export products like copper and cobalt has also helped its economy to grow. According to the IMF, the DRC's economy is expected to grow by 5.4% this year and 6.4% in 2022. But analysts caution that those figures don't reflect the whole picture.
It's true, things have changed seriously. The new head of state and the new government is willing to move things in the right direction. That's where you see they are fighting corruption, they are trying to stop any fraud and things like that. But when you say 5% growth in Congo, you need to know we have 3% growth of demography, which means net growth is 2%. We also calculate that in US dollar, but US dollar is not constant.
The DRC's economic growth is reported to have surpassed the total African growth rate of 3.7% this year. Although the DRC has implemented reforms aimed at improving governance in the management of its natural resources, the country is still struggling to end a conflict in the east that has had a negative impact on the economy. Attacks against foreign nationals working in mining sites in South Kivu and Ituri provinces have caused a lot of unease among investors. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
A firm in Tanzania has rolled out a fleet of retrofitted, wholly electric safari vehicles. They're designed to be part of the broader solution to the challenge of decarbonising personal transport in Tanzania. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has that story.
Spearheading the electric vehicle revolution in Tanzania, this is the first company in the country that is converting car propulsion systems from diesel to electric. 14 safari vehicles have already been adapted.
We are going to have Tanzania to have fully electric vehicles in the next 10 years, so that the existing vehicles can be recycled. Diesel engine goes out, electric motor goes in.
Hans Paul says the battery can be charged between 3 and 12 hours at home.
When this car's battery is fully charged, it will be able to cover a distance between 130 to 300 kilometers. The team here says that safari vehicles like this one could offer savings of nearly $5,000 per vehicle every year.
In a bid to reduce its carbon emissions, Miracle Experience, a balloon safari operator, decided to invest in eMotion's safari vehicle. An almost silent car is particularly useful on safari.
The experience itself is not just viewing the animals or experiencing the terrain, but also to listen to those natural sounds that you have in the bush. So it gives you a perfect experience, you know, from all angles, from all aspects when you are driving in an electric car.
The cost of converting a diesel engine vehicle into an electric motor is around $42,000. But makers of the system say vehicle maintenance costs will be reduced in the long run. And now the company wants to start changing public and private cars.
And right now we are working with the government. Right now we are working with a couple of international firms, and we are looking into how to have it more economical.
It's hoped that with each car converted, an impact will be felt in tackling the climate crisis and improving the quality of life for communities in Tanzania. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Arusha, Tanzania.
Let's dive into the world of cryptocurrencies now. Bitcoin has had a pretty volatile year. It's bounced all the way from $28,000 at the start to a record high of around $69,000 or so in early November. Now, Bitcoin has gone as high as 50,101 today. It stood at around 48,196 at 16:13 GMT. Now, fresh comments from the Securities Exchange Commission Chair, Gary Gensler, about cryptocurrency regulation, uncertainty over the economic damage that the Omicron variant of COVID might cause, among other contributing factors, have all added up to this drop that we're seeing now. But even after falling back from its latest all-time high, Bitcoin prices are still up by 66% so far in 2021. China's Communist Party is calling 2021 a milestone year as the country managed to balance its economic development whilst controlling the spread of COVID. The announcement was made during a high-level meeting on China's economic plans for next year. China's President Xi Jinping and the Premier Li Keqiang were in attendance. President Xi reviewed the country's economic progress this year. The meeting said the country would continue its proactive fiscal policy and prudent monetary policy in 2022. Now, to focus a bit more on that meeting, top Chinese officials have laid out their 2022 priorities at an economic conference in Beijing. Officials are mandating all regions to focus on macroeconomic stability, and they're encouraging government departments to introduce policies to foster a healthy economy. They say that China will continue to deepen reform and opening up to foreign goods and capital as well. Officials are about to strengthen IP protection and build a healthy, competitive environment for businesses. The Central Economic Work Conference will also strive to improve China's tech innovation. The meeting suggested comprehensive plans for social development and pandemic prevention. And I'll leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at the market for small instant loans from non-deposit-taking digital-only lenders. After nearly a decade of operating in a legal vacuum and accusations of predatory lending with annualized interest rates in the triple digits and invasions of privacy, they'll now come under the central bank supervision here in Kenya in 6 months' time. So is this the end of this nascent sector? Or maybe not? We'll explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
Always looking forward to your bulletins, Rava. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Let's now take a short break and return your sport news, including former world boxing champion Mzuzile Mgazwa recovers from gunshot wounds to resume career.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Well, our next story in sport comes from South Africa, where 3 years ago, Umzivukile Mngazwa thought his boxing career was over. A shattered femur from a gunshot wound left the former world champion with a long road to recovery and a near impossible task. But even that traumatic experience could not stop him, and in November this year, he returned to the ring. CGTN DSTV has his story.
Human beings draw inspiration from certain places, be it family, friends, or a role model. For Umzivukile Mngazwa, his motivation stemmed from his desire to return to the boxing ring. It kept him going through the months of rehabilitation, the hours hitting pads, and eventually 3 years after being shot in the leg, led to his remarkable return to the sport.
The KO round 2, I could have made that KO in round 1. I felt it, that KO can happen in round 1. But I just told myself, nah, let me take it easy. Let me slow down. The power was there. We've been building the power since I got here in this gym.
The round 2 stoppage of his opponent at the exhibition fight fueled his passion even more, and now his sights are set on forging a path in a new weight division as a junior featherweight.
After that fight, I felt like, okay, I still got it. But this was a small event. Not everyone saw that. But right now, I want to show everyone that I still got it.
The hard yards the 30-year-old has put in to overcome the limited movement in his leg speaks volumes about his character and determination to succeed in the sport.
It's not easy to be a sportsman because you have to sacrifice. You have to work hard every day. So you have to dedicate yourself on this thing because you love this thing. So it's not something that you can wake up in the morning and say, nah, I'm a boxer, I can do whatever I want. No.
With 20 victories and 3 draws in 23 fights, Mngazwa possesses a stellar undefeated record and has ascended to the top of the bantamweight division as a result. But a new challenge lies ahead, one he is eager to take on, one punch at a time.
That's my everyday dream. I don't want to prove anything. I don't want to prove anything to anyone, but I just want to make sure that I get the title again and to show the people that I still got it.
The gunshot that almost ended Mngazwa's boxing career has changed his life forever, but it hasn't stopped the former world champion from dreaming about regaining the belt he once had strapped around his waist. His remarkable comeback victory is the first step of his journey back and is an inspiring step closer for the man known as Old Bones towards once again staking a claim as the top junior featherweight in the world. CS2+C, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
The Beijing Winter Olympics will mainly rely on chartered and temporary flights from cities like Tokyo and Singapore to bring in athletes for the Games amid concerns over COVID-19 and tight travel restrictions into the country. Chinese and foreign airlines will participate in organizing these temporary flights from cities like Hong Kong, Singapore, Paris and Tokyo, with commercial flights utilized as a supplement. Athletes and other attendees will have to arrive at Beijing Capital International Airport before entering a closed loop, strictly separated from other areas of China, where they will remain for their entire stay before leaving.
The Omicron variant has already spread to over 50 countries. The epidemic prevention situation is still severe and complicated. Considering the needs of preventing imported cases and the recovery of international airline routes, in order to ensure that all stakeholders can come to China to participate in the Winter Olympics in a safe and smooth manner, we determined we will primarily rely on chartered flights, with commercial flights used as a supplement.
The Beijing 2022 Winter Games are less than 2 months away. In Zhangjiakou, one of the 3 competition venues, the Olympic Village and hotels are almost ready for visitors. Our reporter Ning Hong went for a look.
The Olympic Village in the Jiangjiakou competition zone is a newly built complex featuring 31 buildings and more than 2,000 beds. The furniture is ready, including adjustable beds. The hotels for the judges and other officials are built near a competition venue. Some opened for business earlier this month for the ski jumping Continental Cup.
During the Winter Olympics, the Mountain Hotel is mainly for domestic and foreign judges. It has 380 standard rooms. The Media Hotel is beside it. There are 150 single rooms.
During the Winter Olympics, the hotels will also provide 24-hour dining service. Residents can order food and have it delivered to the venue during the competition.
What I hold in hand is the restaurant menu for the national technical officials here. This menu not only includes the name of the food, but also nutrition analysis as well.
We have Chinese stir-fry and Western cooking, Western-style dining with American and Southeast Asian flavors, with curry and black pepper seasonings. There are more than 30 dishes to choose from on the menu.
The Mountain Hotel and Olympic Village are all located at the Guyangshu venue, which includes National Ski Jumping Center, the Cross Country Center, and a Nordic Combined Center. Final work is underway, and the competition area will be completed by the end of the year. Ning Hong, CGTN, Jiangjiakou.
Tottenham Hotspur have had a second match postponed this week after the Premier League agreed on a Thursday to call off Sunday's game at Brighton and Hove Albion